The Titanic. From launch to disaster. The launch into water. It was March 31st, 1912. The ship that would later become one of the most famous ships in history, the RMS Titanic, was almost complete. In the shipyard of Belfast, final preparations were being made before the vessel would enter the sea. On May 31st, 1911, a huge crowd gathered. Thousands of people, journalists, engineers, and curious spectators stood near the shipyard. On that day, Titanic was launched into the water for the first time. The massive ship slowly slid down the slipway rails. With a loud roar and powerful splash, it entered the ocean. For many who witnessed it, it felt like the beginning of a new era in maritime history. However, some engineers were aware that the ship was extremely large and heavy, and there were still minor technical issues. But these were not considered serious problems. After entering the water, Titanic was moved for fitting out. Final construction continued inside the ship. The decks were cleaned, cabins were completed, and luxury interiors were installed for the richest passengers. Testing and preparation. After being launched, the Titanic did not immediately begin its voyage. Instead, several sea trials were conducted. Engines were tested, steam systems were checked, and steering controls were examined. During these trials, the ship performed very well. Engineers concluded that it was almost flawless. Inside, the ship was designed like a floating palace. It had luxurious restaurants, grand halls decorated with gold details, libraries, and relaxation areas. Titanic was not just a ship, it was a symbol of luxury and modern engineering. Boarding of passengers. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic departed from Southampton, England, on its first major voyage. Passengers were divided into three classes: first class, wealthy passengers, millionaires, and businessmen; second class, middle-class travelers; third class, immigrants heading to America for a better life. For many passengers, this journey represented a new beginning. Some dreamed of success in America, while others simply wanted to experience a transatlantic voyage. When the Titanic left Southampton, large crowds gathered to wave goodbye. Entering the Atlantic Ocean. The Titanic also stopped in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, to pick up additional passengers before fully entering the Atlantic Ocean. At this time, the weather was perfect. The sea was calm, the sky was clear, and the wind was gentle. Many passengers spent time on the deck taking photos, listening to music, and relaxing. Daily life on board was luxurious. Elegant meals were served in grand dining rooms. An orchestra played live music. People played cards, and socialized children ran and played on the decks. No one imagined that this journey would end in tragedy. Cold waters and ice. Warning. After several days, the weather began to change. The sea temperature dropped significantly as cold Arctic currents moved through the area. Some sailors warned about icebergs in the region. However, because the Titanic was considered unsinkable, its speed was not reduced. That night, the ocean was unusually calm. There were almost no waves and no wind. Ironically, such conditions made icebergs harder to see. The Lookout's warning. On the night of April 14th, 1912, the lookout crew stood watch in the crow's nest, scanning the dark ocean. Because of the cold, they were not using binoculars. Visibility was very poor. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared in the distance. At first, it seemed small, but it quickly became clear that it was a massive iceberg. The alarm bell was immediately rung, and the bridge was notified. Iceberg straight ahead. Final attempts to avoid collision. The officer in charge immediately ordered the ship to turn. The engines were reversed, and an emergency maneuver was attempted. However, the Titanic was too large and moving too fast to change direction quickly. The ship slowly began turning left, but it was already too late. The impact. Within seconds, disaster struck. The ship was unable to fully avoid the iceberg and scraped along its side. Although the visible part of the iceberg was small, the underwater portion was enormous. It tore along the hull of the ship, creating a long gash. Metal plates broke, and seawater began rushing into the compartments. Most first-class passengers did not immediately realize what had happened. Some thought it was just a minor shake. But for the engineers, the situation was already clear. The ship was slowly beginning to flood.